Good evening and welcome to the Bexar County Commissioners Court Precinct 3 Candidate Forum, presented by the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. My name is TJ Mays, a proud member of the Chamber's 2020 leadership team and host of KLRN's On the Record. 2020 is a critical time for Texas, and there are several open seats to fill in this election. We have a number of issues pressing for our county. It is vital to ensure that businesses in our region are able to grow and create jobs, especially now. We are honored to host tonight's forum featuring two very impressive candidates, Democratic candidate Christine Hortick and Republican candidate Trish DeBerry. Both candidates are vying for the Bexar County Commissioners Court Precinct 3 seat held for nearly 15 years by Commissioner Kevin Wolf. It is important to note that neither the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce nor KLRN endorses political candidates. The purpose of tonight's forum is to inform voters about the candidates' positions on key issues that are of top priority for our region's business community. Now we will begin by discussing the format of the forum. Questions were developed by the Chamber. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to give her opening statement. Both candidates will be asked the same questions, and each candidate will have approximately 2 minutes to respond. A coin toss determined which candidate would be the first to give the opening statement. That same candidate will be asked the first question, and we will rotate subsequent questions until the end of the forum. Each candidate will close with a 1-minute closing statement. That too, determined by a coin toss. Now that we have gone over the format, let us begin. Trish DeBerry, opening statement.
Thank you, TJ. It's a great opportunity to be here. Thank you to KLRN. Thank you to the SA Chamber. I've been a longtime member, served on several committees. So I think it's great from a viewing audience that we have people that are interested in Precinct 3. From a professional standpoint, really, the precinct is very, very large. We have 526,000 people that are in the precinct. That means that's the size of a congressional district. So the people are many and the needs are great. When I'm at the doorstep block walking, we're talking about property taxes. We're talking about appraisal reform. We're talking about not defunding the police. We're also talking about transportation and mobility. Big issues for Precinct 3. So those are the things that I want to tackle once I get into the office. Like I said, from a professional standpoint, the fact that I've got a pragmatic private sector business skill set, been an entrepreneur for the better part of 20 years, have hired people, have had to fire people. You know, I've also looked at a payroll, scrubbed budgets, signed not just the back of a paycheck, but the front of a paycheck. I'd like to say that I've been eating, sleeping, and breathing Republican principles all of my life, which is creating jobs for people and putting taxes into the economy. So I think that pragmatic business skill set is really important, especially in a down economy, because I've suffered through 9/11. I've suffered through the downturn in the economy in 2009 and had to make very difficult decisions. And that's what you need, a leader in office on the court who has made those difficult decisions. From strictly a personal standpoint, I have been born and raised in the precinct. I live in Alamo Heights right now, but I lived in District 9, I lived in District 10. I'm the daughter of an Air Force veteran. My mother worked in civil service at Fort Sam and Kelly Air Force Base. So I know we have 3 military installations in the precinct, and that's really important to me too. But I know the needs, I know the opportunities, I know the challenges associated with growth in Precinct 3, and that's what I bring to the table, and that's what I want to tackle.
Christine Hortick, your opening statement.
Well, thanks, TJ, for moderating tonight, and thank you to the San Antonio Chamber for giving us an opportunity to speak to members of the Chamber and the general public. I'm born and raised here in San Antonio. I'm a longtime resident of Precinct 3. I'm a mom of 2 school-age children, Charlotte and Harrison. I graduated from Brackenridge High School. After graduating from high school, I moved up to Boston for college. While I was there, I had an opportunity to work for Senator Ted Kennedy as a congressional aide working in Veterans Affairs. After I finished up at the Senator's office, I came back to San Antonio, started at St. Mary's Law, graduated in '05. I've been licensed almost 15 years. For the last 10 years or so, my practice has focused predominantly on children's court cases where I represent children and parents in abuse and neglect cases. And I think that work experience has given me a very unique perspective on a lot of the issues that are facing the community as a whole. My platform consists of 3 main components. The first is healthy families. It's very important that we do everything we can to ensure that our families are healthy both physically and mentally. The second component involves smart transportation. It's estimated that an additional 1 million people will be residing in Bexar County in the next 20 years, and it's very important that we start planning for the stresses on our roadways and the congestion that is definitely on its way. Finally, the last part of my platform I call the durable community. That's where I think it involves the fundamentals of things that we need in the community to be successful. And by that, I mean we need to address infrastructure. We need to make sure that we allocate proper resources so that our infrastructure is safe and that it continues to grow with the county. Also involved in that is employment. We really need to make sure that we are helping residents find jobs and career opportunities. I think we need to focus on a strong, diversified workforce, and we need to be able to prepare our residents to compete for local jobs.
All right, now the opening statements are finished. We are on to the first question. Coin toss, Trish DeBerry.
Thank you.
What do you think the major issues are? You touched on them in your opening statement, and if elected, what are your priorities going to be?
So it's interesting. When I got into this race, we talked a lot about criminal justice reform. We talked about the fact that the jail was kind of a hot mess. But we've always talked about appraisal reform and property taxes. Like I said, we've knocked on, since the runoff, probably 8,000 doors. And by and large, the neighborhoods that I'm in, that is the #1 issue, are property taxes. Precinct 3 pays more than 50% of the property taxes. So we need to focus on that. One of the ideas that I have around appraisal reform, and it's a heavy lift, and we're going to have to go to the legislature to get it done, but I'm willing to do that. The board of directors at the appraisal district is currently appointed. So I want to get that board elected because I want the taxpayer to have more of a voice on the board. And so I'm willing to dig in and I'm willing to get that done. But I will tell you first and foremost, based upon my practical expertise in the private sector and owning a business for 25 years, we've got to jumpstart the economy and we've got to put people back to work. So that's going to be my focus. We're going to cut discretionary spending, which has been out of control. We're going to reduce the debt. You know, part of being a business person is not just looking at something and thinking, hey, it's easy to make the cuts, right? But the hard part is prioritizing what are we going to do once we get in there. And we've got to create jobs. And so I think one of the things I want to tackle when I get in there is a sweeping infrastructure bond project that are shovel-ready projects that are going to put people to work immediately. That's most important as we look at workforce development. But then infrastructure is going to be critically important too. So mobility, putting people back to work, transportation, but most importantly, this economy's got to get healthy because we've taken a deep hit and you need a practical, pragmatic business person in the office to be able to lead us out of that.
Christine Hortick, what would your priorities be if you're elected?
My first priority would be economic recovery, specifically providing assistance to small businesses. As we know, small businesses are the backbone of our local economy, and we need to do everything we can to help support them, to keep their doors open so that they can pay their employees, so that those employees can go home and make their house payment, their car payment, feed their kids. So I think we need to build on the progress or the progress that the county has made during this pandemic and work to assist small business as best we can. I mean, the county has allocated, I believe, $7 million at this point for small businesses in the form of grants and loans. And those monies have already been depleted. And I think that's something that the county needs to continue to do because our local small businesses, they employ our friends, our family, our neighbors, and they provide career opportunities for our local residents. And it's very important that we support them during this very difficult time.
The next question has to do with attracting investment into San Antonio. We all know we live in a globalized economy. We know that now more than ever. And we're competing with cities, counties, states throughout the world. How are we going to get that capital here in Bexar County? You're first, Christine.
Okay. Well, we need to make Bexar County attractive, right? We need to provide incentives for businesses to come to San Antonio and Bexar County. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that we have a strong workforce, that we invest in ourselves. We can't expect businesses to invest in our community if we're not willing to do that. And we need to walk that line of attracting businesses to the county and city with abatements and incentives and those sorts of things. But we need to make sure that we tie certain guidelines to that. We want businesses to come to San Antonio and to the county who are going to bring jobs to the community, that they're going to pay a living wage, that they're going to invest themselves in the community. So I think that is the first step. I think we need to make San Antonio and the county a place that people want to live and want to stay here. So we want to make sure that we're attracting the businesses we're attracting and the residents that we're training for our local jobs, that they want to stay here in San Antonio and in the county. So that way we get a long-term return on our investment in our own people.
Trish DeBerry, how would you make Bexar County attractive for capital investment?
It's a great topic. When you look at the Economic Development Foundation, we have an economic development office at the county, we have one at the city. I think, we're still somewhat fractured. So I think we've got to look at some consolidation efficiencies associated with those departments. But I also think, TJ, you make a great point. We live in a global economy. And, when you look at what's important to San Antonio, military will continue to be really important, but we've got to look at technology transfer from the military. That feeds into cybersecurity. We've got to look at healthcare and bioscience. So when we talk about workforce development, which is really, really important, I think the community for far too long has looked at call centers and low-paying jobs. We have got to beat the rap that San Antonio is a low-paying city. And so we've got to really lean into cybersecurity, bioscience and technology, and what do we do with that? So I think, it's when you look at who is coming to San Antonio, and it's a big competitive marketplace. Number one issue the companies are looking for is infrastructure, affordable power, affordable water, affordable infrastructure. Can we get our employees to work on time? That's really important. Number two, payroll, quality of life. What are we paying in taxes? What are we looking at quality of life as far as our employees? And number three, yes, it's workforce development. But we need to make sure when we're doing abatements and we're doing those kinds of initiatives in special taxing districts and PIDs and those kinds of things, which are necessary to attract economic development, we need to make sure that those jobs are being created in the right sectors so that we can elevate where we're at here in Bexar County and in San Antonio.
We're having a conversation about workforce. There's a November election about it. What do you believe the county's role is in workforce development vis-a-vis the city and all the other entities that are involved?
Well, obviously the mayor's job training initiative is the city's, correct? But one of the things I'm going to be looking at very closely, and I've made this very clear, is we've got to look at metrics associated with that program. What is the stickiness regarding people staying in the program? Because by and large, there's been a history of about a 25% dropout rate. So what are we doing to incentivize people to stay in the program? Where is the Citizens Oversight Committee regarding where the money is being spent, regarding overhead or how much is actually going into job training? As we look at KPIs, what are the key performance indexes associated with success? So I'm going to be looking for answers to those sorts of questions. No question, we've got to do a better job with workforce development. But where I think the county can be really, really effective is when we look at small business development. I think we've kind of dropped off the radar screen. It's all about job training 4 or 5 years down the line. We need to put people to work now. Small businesses are suffering. As a small business owner myself, I can empathize with the small business owner who's out there. We need to be big business together, small business together. We need to have kind of a small business lifeline task force that's meeting on a regular basis, and so that we're benchmarking with them, and we're also talking to them about what are the jobs you have coming up? What are the jobs that we can fill? How can we do that effectively? So it's all about where the money is being spent, but it's how do we help small business but job train at the same time?
Christine, what do you think the county's role in workforce development should be?
I think the county should have a very strong role. I mean, part of the commissioner's court is to make decisions that are going to impact residents today and 10 years in the future. And we need to be planning ahead to make sure that our residents are as best prepared as they possibly can. I think the COVID workforce development program that the county has initiated is a good testing ground to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And so I think the county is finding, like I said, what works and what doesn't work. And so I think it's going to be important that they follow along with what the city's doing and also see what the city does right and city does wrong and figure out ways to complement the city, whether that be creating programs that overlap that do the same thing as the city, or perhaps maybe it's a situation where the county subsidizes part of the city's program so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So it's all about making sure that we are doing the best we can for our residents. I mean, we can also expand current programs such as the FAME program that is more of an apprenticeship sponsorship, employer sponsorship program. That way people are able to train, they're able to work, and they're able to work towards a better employment future now.
So we're having this conversation. The Commissioner's Court recently adopted a budget. The jail is the biggest line item in the county's budget, and we read about it in the paper all the time. Judge Wolf penned an op-ed recently, and he said, I quote, "Our criminal justice system is systematically flawed to the extent that it fails to administer justice to the poor, the homeless, minorities, to the mentally ill, and to drug-dependent citizens." If elected, what steps would you take to fix the flawed criminal justice system?
Well, I think the first thing that when we're talking about the justice system, we need to talk about more than just the courthouse or law enforcement. We need to talk about all those factors that lead people to a higher propensity to end up in the criminal justice system to start. So that means we need to talk about housing, we need to talk about education, drug addiction, and especially mental health. I think the way we truly improve the system is by investing in our community long before people end up in the county jail. I think that's the most important way that we can affect long-term change. Mental health, as we know, has been in the news quite a bit lately, and I'm glad that mental health is getting the attention that it deserves. Those of us who work at the courthouse have known for years that much more needed to be done, and I'm glad that it's getting the attention it is now. Mental health is something that we really need to focus on, not only for the criminal justice system, but just as a community overall. 40% of people who have severe mental illness will likely end up in the criminal justice system at some point during their life. So I think we really need to invest in medical professionals and medical facilities on the front end before people even get arrested, so that we can prevent that from happening. For those individuals who end up in the criminal justice system, we need to find a way to divert them from going to the jail. And when I say that, I'm talking about nonviolent offenders, people who aren't a threat to themselves or society, because we want to make sure that we keep everyone as safe as possible. But putting someone in the jail when they belong in a mental health facility or just need regular treatment, it doesn't do them any good to be sitting in jail. I mean, it's just a part of a vicious cycle. People get arrested, they have mental health issues, they're not able to bond out, they stay in the jail. They eventually plea out after time served, their mental health isn't any better, they get released, they get arrested, and it just perpetuates the cycle. So again, I think investing in our community is the best way that we can fix the criminal justice system.
Trish DeBerry, how do you think we should fix the criminal justice system?
It's a great question. And I think, TJ, to the op-ed that was penned by the county judge, the criminal justice system in Bexar County has been broken for a very, very long time. I think we're making strides in addressing some of the problems that we have. Let me address just from a strategic standpoint, because I feel like in my heart of hearts, that's what I am, a strategist. And so I think from a strategic standpoint, I'm very honored to have the support of the San Antonio Police Officers Association, deputy sheriffs as well, because there are issues at the jail. Like I talked about, it's kind of a hot mess. One of the things I've talked about strategically is that perhaps the job of sheriff, two jobs, meaning law enforcement and management of the jail, has become too big for one person. You know, my feeling is let the badge do what the badge does best, and that is enforce the law, arrest the bad guys, right? You know, and a long time ago, several years ago, administration of the jail used to be back at the court. So it may be time to take a close look at what does professional jail administration look like, and what is the court's opportunity to really get jail administration, no pun intended, locked up, so that we can professionalize and streamline. And I guarantee you, we're going to see cost efficiencies associated with that. You know, from a tactical standpoint, I think it does my heart good, or I know it does my heart good, to see that the homeless population, especially, and a lot of those are veterans that have PTSS. A lot of us know that as, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now we're calling it post-traumatic stress syndrome. But a lot of them have mental health issues. They shouldn't be wallowing in the jail, and they shouldn't be committing suicide in the jail. So allowing those people to have PR bonds, I think, is definitely a step in the right direction. As we look at, you know, the MAC system, they just got some publicity regarding court-appointed attorneys, and what is the management from the public defender's office associated with that. We absolutely need to be doing that, because somebody who's been arrested, who's not of, you know, sound mind and judgment, deserves the same sort of representation as another criminal who may not have mental health issues. So I think we've been stagnant for a long time. But I think Ron Hell is doing a really good job. And the other thing we've got to talk about is bond and bail reform. And what does that look like? We've got to do a deep dive into that.
A lot of issues in the criminal justice system. Another big line item in the county budget is infrastructure, roadways. I know that Precinct 3 has a lot of traffic issues. How would you approach that as commissioner?
Yeah, we have tremendous growth and we have tremendous traffic issues. I mean, we're very attractive because of the available land that we have out there. But, you know, I think we've done somewhat of a good job regarding trying to control traffic. But when you look at the housing market, it's still booming, even in the midst of a pandemic. And people are moving here from out of town. We've got to continue to manage that growth. What does that look like? You know, the I-10-1604 interchange that Kevin Wolf brought to bear through the state. It's a big project. I mean, that's going to alleviate a lot of pain. It's going to be short-term pain with long-term gain. We look at Northwest Military Highway and Heidner. You know, more than 40,000 cars are going through that intersection every single day. We've got to prioritize road projects because people don't want to be stuck in congestion. When you look at the issue associated with Blanco Road north of 1604, that's a very complicated topic, but it's also a cause for heartburn for the people of Precinct 3. When you look at the property associated with that extension, it's TxDOT, it's county, it's city, then it's county again. So we've got to, like I said, dig in. We've got to lean into it because there are complicated issues regarding traffic and how we're going to manage capacity on those roadways. It doesn't come in the form of toll roads. You know, it comes in the form of managed capacity and what does that look like. But, I mean, the good news about being a commissioner on the court is you do have a seat, you know, regarding SAMCO. You do have a seat regarding some say-so into the Regional Mobility Authority. So with that, yes, when I talked at the beginning of my intro, when I talked about infrastructure and congestion being a top priority with me, it will continue to be.
Christine, if you're elected to county commissioner, how would you approach infrastructure?
Well, infrastructure is going to involve our roads, our bridges, our flood control, that sort of thing. We need to make sure that we are forward thinking. We know the city and county is going to continue to grow, so we need to be prepared and we need to better allocate our resources now rather than later to make sure that we can grow according with the population in a safe manner. Regarding transportation, I mean, we know people are going to come to San Antonio and the county. We're only going to get bigger. And so transportation is an issue that I don't think you can talk about it without mentioning other forms of transportation other than cars. I mean, cars and roads are always going to be a part of our local transportation system, but we need to be forward thinking. We need to come up with other ways to move people within the county. I mean, we cannot pave our way out of the traffic that's coming. So we need to utilize our partners. We need to work with TxDOT via Metropolitan Transit, and we need to take advantage of smart technology to try and move people around in the most efficient way. We need to make sure that we give people choices of how they want to move, whether they want to ride their bike, they want to walk, they want to take a bus, they want to take their car. They should be free to do that, but they should have the choice to do so.
Okay, this is our last question, and it has to do with the linear Creekway program. As you know, the city has a very popular trails program, and there's been some discussion that the county may have to take that over. If elected, this may be something that you're dealing with pretty immediately. Right. Christine, what is your view about whether the county should take that over?
Well, I think that the Creekway project is one of those capital projects that we should invest in. Those parks benefit our residents specifically. It gives them an opportunity to be out and exercise, interact with their neighbors from a safe distance at this point. And that's a very important project. In the future, I would support the Linear Creekways project, but that's something that I wouldn't be able to commit to until next year. We won't know until the spring what sort of financial landscape the county is going to be in. We have to wait for revenue from property taxes to actually come in to see how much revenue we're actually going to get. And we need to know what the appraisal values are going to be in January so that way we'll know what we're going to get the following year. And I think once we have that information, it will be we'll be able to better make that decision. I think to make that decision now would be irresponsible.
Trish DeBerry, what do you think?
No, I've utilized those trails. My kids have utilized those trails. At one time I lived in Summerfield, which is in the heart of District 8. And used to actually push strollers of my kids before it was even Hardburger Park. I mean, we were looking for a park to be able to walk in. So fast forward, it became Hardburger Park. So I've run along those trails too. So I know how popular they are. I've also had conversations with the likes of, you know, Bonnie Connor, who was super supportive in the initial days regarding even aquifer protection and the linear parks and the greenways program. And so I think, you know, from an either or, I mean, that's the problem, right, with the citizens of Precinct 3. There's a perception from a mobility standpoint that we're trading in aquifer and greenways for mobility and buses. And without there being a culture of riding buses in Precinct 3, I think the onus is upon VIA to translate what does that mean for Precinct 3, aside from just buses? Because aquifer and greenway and linear parks are so incredibly important and popular, and it is a program that has worked. That being said, from a county perspective, When I announced I was running for this office, we were facing a surplus. Now we are facing a deficit. So we're going to have to look, and I think it's rather unfair. The city is taking on more debt, which I don't think is a good idea, to be able to do this, to pawn it off on the county when we have a lot of other needs too. But we're going to take a look at it really closely. If that $100 million that the city has come up with via SAWS doesn't cover it, I'm sure we'll take a close look at it because it's as popular as it has been. However, there are going to be a lot of other competing needs associated with the budget.
That concludes our question and answer portion. 1 minute closing statements. First is Trish DeBerry.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. As I talked about the fact we have many, many different needs in the precinct. We pay more than 50% of the property taxes in the precinct. And so when I talk about appraisal reform, I'm not just talking the talk. I'm walking the walk because it is really, really important. You know, I've said on the campaign trail too, I'm not going to be a seat warmer. I'm going to be a deep diver. That has been my reputation in this community for a very, very long time. So I'm going to dig in and I'm going to do the heavy lifting that's necessary to bring about cost savings to the taxpayers of Precinct 3. There again, we have to take a look at mobility. We have to take a look at congestion and what does that mean. But I do think, because I've been a multitasker all of my life, you know, I've been a single mother of 2 great kids, given them 100%, given my business 100%, given this community 100% and nonprofit, and passing legislation to protect children regarding cyberbullying under David's Law, which is a passion project for me. Those are the kinds of thinking, outside the box thinking, small business, pragmatic business skill set from a leadership standpoint that I'm going to bring to the court.
All right, Christine Hortick, your closing statement.
Well, thank you, TJ, again for moderating tonight's conversation. And I'd like to thank the people at home for taking the time to learn about this race. I'm asking for people to vote for me in November because I want to put my more than 20 years experience advocating for the community to work in Precinct 3. Almost 40% of the county's budget is spent on the courthouse and the jail. As a practicing attorney, I already have a working knowledge of both of those areas. With me, residents will get a full-time commissioner. If elected, I will close my law practice so that I can focus 100% on the job, and that so there is no conflict of interest between my business and my elected position. I want people to have a commissioner that they know that if they have a problem, they have a question, an issue, they know that they can come to me, that I'll be available, that I'll do whatever I can do to assist them. And lastly, if elected, I promise to represent residents' interests and not special interests.
Christine Hortick, Democratic candidate. Trish DeBerry, Republican candidate for Precinct 3. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this special edition of On the Record, sponsored by the San Antonio Chamber, where we talked with the Precinct 3 candidates. As you can tell, a lot of great ideas, a lot of great passion, and it'll be interesting to watch the November election. Thank you for joining us. As always, go to KLRN.org to view this episode or previous episodes in video or podcast format. We will see you next week. Thank you.